Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Bible study. The second part, Does God Exist? So, does God exist outline? As last week we saw evidence against the existence of God. Today I changed the title a bit because as I was reading, I realized this is more relevant. Is belief in God irrational? That's what many think. Then next week we will look at arguments for the evidence of God. Then we will look at biblical evidence. I don't want to see biblical evidence before we see other evidences so that our studies have more weight on what the world is saying rather than just stick to our own Bible. Then this is another important question. If God created the universe, then who created God? Then of course we believe in one God, but there's millions of gods around the world. Can we really prove that God is only one? We will look at that. There's other topics, but we will stick to the six. And in case if there's a need for other things, we will look at them. But for now, arguments against the existence of God, part one. If you remember last week, we studied about empirical in deduction, induction, and then other things. These are the four things we looked at: empirical, deductive, inductive, and subjective arguments. Okay. If you are unclear of what these mean, please go to my YouTube channel. It is there. You can again listen to them to understand better. But just for summary, empirical means you need to experience and see it. Many people are saying when they see the inconsistencies in the Bible itself and around the world, different people speak differently about God. They say this can't be true. If God is one, if God is powerful, how can different people have different ideas? And then about the evil, if God is loving and powerful, how can he allow this evil and all innocent people die? And another thing, unnecessary evil, that is even worse. Okay, some evil is necessary to correct and to put people in the right direction. That is understandable. But unnecessary evil where innocent people suffer, children die, and how can you justify what is achieved by those things? So like this thing, there's so many evidences that the world is coming up in order to say if God is there, these things don't happen. Since these things are happening, it simply means there
There
is
is no
no
God.
God. There's no God. Yeah. Today we will look at, is belief in God irrational? Many people who don't believe in God think that people who believe in God, they only hang on to faith. They have no. So many think that we are irrational. So many atheists and philosophers and psychologists and many people who are great thinkers think that this is belief in God is very irrational. The most debated question of modern times is the existence of God. Anyone who believes in God are seen as being delusional and irrational. Like Karl Marx, we all know, seems to suggest. Elder Naomi, if you could mute people as they come in, it'll help. See, like Karl Marx seemed to imply that anyone believing in God must have a mental disorder that caused invalid thinking. It's a serious comment, isn't it? And we have seen last week some people like Karl Marx. He said religion is what did he say? The sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. It's a very strong statement. He also said religion is the impotence of the human mind to deal with occurrences it cannot understand. That means we don't want to reason it out. So we simply say, I believe. We don't want to exercise reasoning. That's what this German philosopher said. In fact, one of his statements I believe is, my object in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. To a certain extent, I think he trying to prove himself, but all of us who believe in God, we know that this is only temporary and localized. God will prevail no matter what man will do. Another man says the person who believed in a creator God was delusional and only held that belief due to wish fulfillment. We need God because we want something from him. Only people who have a wishes to be fulfilled, they are the ones who believe in a God. So all these comments, like this man says, faith equates to not wanting to know what is true. That means we are not willing to know the truth. We are not willing to think for ourselves. We are not willing to rationalize what we see around. We just want to blindly believe. These are some of the great minds that have revolutionized the psychology, philosophy, and the thinking world, which seem to suggest that people who believe there is God are irrational people. They don't want to exercise their mind, they just want to believe. This is what the world is trying to say. Okay, now the question is it true that belief in God is an irrational position? Is that really true? Is the question we need to answer. Okay, is there any religion that appeals to rationality, or all religions take irrational position?
Yourself again?
Now, if you ask that question, we know so many religions, hundreds of religions, at least we know 6, 7 major religions of the world. Is everything in the same direction? Are all irrational? We don't have time to study all religions, but my point is the only religion that appeals to the intellect is Christianity. It doesn't talk of any myths or legends or made up of stories. If you go to the Greek religion and Egyptian religions, Babylonian religions, and some of the Hindu religions, mythology is the paramount. But when it comes to Christianity, you don't see it. Christianity has no myths, no legends. They are not made up of stories. Of course, later we will prove when we look at the biblical evidence for God. But this is the only religion that can be proven by science, reason, and experience. Okay, we don't just say by experience, well, you may not believe in God. I believe because I had a revelation. I experienced him. We don't stop there. We can prove God by through science and reason as well, provided we are willing to learn how these things work. So this is the only religion that can be logically argued for the existence of God. But how? Let's look at it. The only way we can do that is to make religion, Christianity, a religion that can be proven by reason. We need to ask the right questions, the basic questions on human life or the existence. If you ask them, then you will be able to find answers. For example, to argue for the existence of God, we must ask the right questions. That is key to understanding and reasoning out for the existence of God. We begin with the most metaphysical questions. What is that? Why do we have something rather than nothing? This is the first question any rational being will ask when he or she thinks of existence of anything, humans or life or earth or planet or universe. The first question is, why do we have something rather than nothing? That is the question for rational people. This is the basic question of existence. What does that mean? Why are we here? What is the purpose? Why are we here? Why is the earth here? Why is the universe here instead of nothing? This is philosophical questions. When if you're in a philosopher student, these are some basic questions that you will be asked to join, to look into them. Why is the universe here instead of nothing? Why is the earth here? Why am I here? We need to find answers. This can be answered only by reasoning. It's not just by faith you can say this. Reason makes sense, and we need to be able to find. So the only way to answer this basic question, why do we have something rather than nothing, is by reason. There's four possible answers to these questions. This is from philosophical world. We are not doing anything from Bible today. So four possible answers to answer the question, why is there something instead of nothing? What is it? The four possible questions we need to answer is reality is an illusion. There's people who believe reality is just an illusion. Some believe reality is or was self-created. Reality is self-existent. That's eternal. It's been there from long. And some say reality was created by something that is self-existent. These four statements cannot be, if you take them one by one, then you realize which one actually makes sense for reasoning. For your reason, which one do really bring some kind of reason? That's what we will study today. Please pay attention because this needs a clarity. Okay, the first one is reality is an illusion. Some believe reality is just an illusion. What is illusion? An instance of a wrong or misrepresented perception of a sensory experience, a deceptive appearance or impression. It's not real, but it seems to be real, something like that. If people who believe that this universe or God or whatever is metaphysical is just an illusion, it seems real, but it is not, something like that. By the way, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a psychologist. I'm only trying to share what I've read in books. So if you're looking for deep meanings of all this, I think I'm not the right person. I'm trying to understand the basics. So hope you will understand that. There's a philosopher and a mathematician, very important in the philosophical world. He has done so much on the existence of God and other things. And if you're a keen student on philosophy, maybe you should read his books. Rene Descartes, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing right. He says, I think, therefore I am. What does that mean? People who say reality is an illusion, he's trying to say, no, the fact that I'm thinking indicates that I am. I'm not an illusion. He also argued that if he was thinking, then he must be. In other words, I think, therefore I'm not an illusion. So if people say humanity is an illusion, he's trying to say, no, it can't be. I think, therefore I am there. It's not an illusion. Illusion requires something experiencing the illusion. Moreover, you cannot doubt your existence without proving your existence. It is a self-defeating argument. In another, maybe make it a bit more clearer by the person called Scruton in a book, or he wrote a book on a short history of modern philosophy, commenting on what Descartes said. This is what he says. According to Descartes, this proposition, I think, is peculiar in that it cannot be entertained without at the same time and for the very reason being true. How? It is not a necessary truth. It might have been false. Nevertheless, I know for certain that it is true. How do you know it is true? I know this since even if I were to doubt that I think, that means you're thinking, but you doubt that you're thinking, he says, then my very doubt would confirm that I do think. Because I'm doubting, doubting itself is a thinking. So that means I am thinking. In other words, the proposition I think is self-verifying. It's not an illusion, it is a self-verifying. The mere possibility of thinking, it establishes its truth. It is therefore absurd to doubt it. So in conclusion, what is it? Philosophy has concluded. So the possibility of reality being an illusion is eliminated. All thinking philosophers do not agree that the reality is an illusion, as much as you may not see everything, what we may not understand. The fact that you think, like this man says, I think, therefore I am. I'm not an illusion. So this argument is eliminated. The second is the reality is or was self-created. That means if you believe there's a reality, it must be self-created. What is this? So in the philosophy, there's something called analytical false statements. That is, statements which are false by definition. How does that work? If you created yourself, this is what this philosophy says, the reality is self-created. So if you created yourself, then you must have existed prior to your creating yourself. Does that make sense, isn't it? If you created yourself, where did you come from? That means you existed before you created itself. That's how they think. But that simply cannot be. In evolution, it is sometimes called as spontaneous generation, something coming from nothing, a position very few hold because you cannot get something from nothing. Most scholars, philosophers, evolutionists, and theorists, all those people, they come to one conclusion: there is no way something can come out of nothing. So, self created doesn't hold in reasoning. So, atheist, there's a person called atheist David Hume. He says, I never asserted so absurd a proposition that as that anything might arise without a cause. What is his argument? He says, I haven't come across anything that exists without a cause. And what does that mean? He says, since something cannot come from nothing, the alternative of reality being self-created is ruled out. So, since self-created means it just should happen, but the reasoning and science and whatever so far discoveries have made, they realize There's no way something would come out of nothing. Therefore, self-created reasoning is ruled out. It can't be. The third, reality is self-existing. No, if it can be self-created, maybe it is self-existing. That's what the third argument says. Till date, all key scientific and philosophical evidence points away from an eternal universe and toward an eternal creator. No scientist, no scientific theory, no scholar, philosopher, or psychologist, or whoever you call, have come to conclusion that something existed from eternity. There was a point of time when something began. So this also, for example, honest scientists believe that universe had a beginning, and whatever has a beginning is not eternal. That's what eternal means. It shouldn't be having a beginning. Since it began, it can't be eternal because there was a point of time it began. In other words, whatever has a beginning has a cause. And if the universe had a beginning, it had a cause. So what are they trying to say? Evidence that the universe had a beginning. The second law of thermodynamics, the radiation echo of the Big Bang discovered in the early 1900s. The fact that the universe is expanding and can be traced back to a singular beginning, and Einstein's theory of relativity, all these prove universe is not eternal. In other words, most of the scientific theories that come up with, they all have one conclusion, is that there was a beginning. Whether you believe in a Big Bang or came up from Amoeba or what I know, what are the theories we have, theory, Darwin's theory, and whatever it could be. Every scientist come to some conclusion. There was a beginning, so which disproves or disqualifies that something existed which is self-existing or eternal. Continuing on this further, the laws that surround causation speak against the universe being the ultimate cause of all we know for the simple fact an effect must resemble its cause. This being true, no atheist can explain how an impersonal, purposeless, meaningless, and amoral universe accidentally created beings who are full of personality and obsessed with purpose, meaning, and morals. That means, how can something that has no purpose, no meaning, doesn't resemble anything, create or make something that has purpose and meaning and morals? That is something that is very difficult to explain even by scholars who reason out things. There's no way a purposeless, meaningless, impersonal, amoral thing can create something that is moral and purpose and meaning. So they say it can't be. So the concept of eternal universe is eliminated. So this can't be. Now we are left with the last one. Reality was created by something that is self-existing. How does that work? Now, philosopher J.S. Mill, it is self-evident that only mind can create mind. That's what the conclusion is. Something existed that created. You do not get something from nothing. That's a common belief among all reasoning, thinking people. Therefore, a necessary and eternal something existed. The only two options are an eternal universe or an eternal creator. That means that something must exist in order to bring life or make other things happen. Only two possible things is what? There must have been an eternal universe that was self-existent, or there must have been an eternal creator. Now, when it comes to self-existing universe, we read in the third one, science and philosophy have disproved the concept of an eternal universe. Science and philosophy said, no, there was a beginning. So by reason, nobody agrees that the universe was self-existing. There was a time that began, like the Big Bang theory. We will study that later part, not in the God study, but in creation and other things we will study. But for now, I want you to know that the philosophy and science have disproved the concept of eternal universe. Nobody believes the universe was eternal. The only option left is what? Then there must be an eternal creator that might have existed. Now that is also their doubt. I want us to know philosophy and science, they are humble enough to confess that they don't have all the answers. Let's not think that they're arrogant and they give answer to everything. But the possibility is only an eternal universe or an eternal creator. And they have disproved eternal universe cannot be because there was a beginning. And now the only option is eternal creator. Now they have to prove or disprove if there is an eternal creator. So in order, so commenting on this, there's another atheist called Lee Strobel who arrived at the above conclusion. He said, I realized that to stay an atheist, I would have to believe. That means if I were to remain as an atheist, because I don't believe in God, I would have to believe certain things. And he puts all this. What does he have to believe? Nothing produces everything. If you were to remain as an atheist, you don't believe God created things. You don't believe the universe is self-existing because you believe it had a beginning. Now, so if that's what your belief is, then you have to believe these statements. What is he saying? Nothing produces everything. Now, anybody with common sense struggle to rationalize this statement, isn't it? He's actually saying, I have to believe this if I were to remain as an atheist. Non-life produces life. Randomness produces fine tuning. Now, if you're a science student, you know how the sun and moon and stars and universe, everything in its fine tuning. I believe the sun was in such a place where if it was some degree closer than it is, we would all be burned to death. If it was little further than where it is, the whole earth will be frozen. It was put in such an exact place where life is possible on this earth. So if you were an atheist, he says, I must believe that all these things happen random. It was not designed, it just happened. Chaos produces information. Unconsciousness produces consciousness. Non-reason produces reason. He's saying, if I were to believe as an atheist, then I have to believe these statements. Then he says, those leaps of faith were simply too big for me to take, especially in the light of the affirmative case for God's existence. In other words, in my assessment, the Christian worldview accounted for the totality of the evidence much better than the atheistic worldview. What a powerful confession. Because he's saying, if I were to believe, then these statements must be true. And everybody who rightly thinks can reason out these statements can't be true. So he's saying the closest possibility of the truth is what the worldview Christians hold. He's not become a Christian, but he thinks that's being humble enough to say that, they have something better that I don't. Doesn't mean that he believes. So the questions to tackle in belief of eternal creator. So if we were to say, yes, there is a creator that made everything, then we have to tackle certain questions. If an eternal creator exists, what kind of creator is he? Can we infer things about him from what he created? Can we understand him by the things that we see that he created? Can we understand the cause by its effects? If for a reasoning mind, the answer is yes, but how? The following characteristics must be in that creator if he must be argued for the creation. What are some of the qualities the philosophy says? He must be supernatural in nature, since he created time and space. If we believe there's a creator, he must be so powerful, he should be beyond time and space. How can you create something that contains you? Whatever you create must be outside of you. Was it Galileo who said, if you show me a space where you take me outside the earth, where I can stand, I can weigh the earth and tell you what it weighs, something like that? There's no way it could happen. So if you believe there's a supernatural person who created, he must be beyond time and space. Then it also says he must be powerful, exceedingly powerful. There's nothing even in comparison to that. But looking at the force of nature and the world and the universe, he must be beyond even any imagination of power. He must be eternal, that is self-existent. Otherwise, you can ask the question, if God created the universe, then who created God? That is one of our topic. We will spend a complete hour on that in few weeks' time. But for now, it must be eternal. That means self-existing. if he were to create something. Otherwise, there will be no end to asking, God created universe, then who created God? And you have to answer it. And if something comes up with the answer, the question will be, then who created that person? Who created that? There is no end. It will be an infinite question. We will study that when we come to that topic. But for now, he must be eternal. That's what the philosophy says. He must be omnipotent. He created space and not limited by it. How powerful is he? Omnipotent. That no space can contain him. That's what we call a supernatural. He must be timeless and changeless. No time should affect him. No change should affect him, because he's the one who created time. He must be immaterial. Why? Because he transcends space and physicality. Imagine if he has a body like us and he has two eyes and one nose and hands and legs. Where does he, how do you contain him? Where? He must be immaterial. That's the only way a supernatural being. Look at the universe, how big it is. How big? No man can even comprehend. What we know about the universe is so tiny. So tiny. And the universe is huge. Then he must be personal. Why? Because when you see the creation around, there's a personal touch. Because the impersonal, according to philosophy, the impersonal cannot create personality. So he must be having a personality. He must be infinite and he must be singular, because they also, you cannot have two infinites. He must be diverse yet unity, because all around the world you see, especially in nature, there's diversity exists. He must be intelligent supremely, not a cognitive being, and produced a cognitive. Only a cognitive being can produce a cognitive being. He must be purposeful, as he deliberately created everything. That means whatever he did, there was a purpose. He must be moral. No moral law can be had without a giver. He must be caring. Actually, today I was reading this book. I don't know if you can see. It's titled The Language of God. A scientist presents evidence for God. It's an amazing book, how an atheist who is a scientist turned to become a believer in God. So what are they saying? And his first argument in this book is morality. No atheist or anybody who doesn't believe in a created personal God cannot defend morality and the law that existed. So he's saying he must be a moral being and he must be caring, because no moral law would have been given. So these are some of the characteristics that summarize. If you were to believe in a creator, eternal creator, these are the qualities that the philosophy and the scientific world and reasoning world are saying he must have if it was to be true. Now, which religion in the world describes such a creator? Hinduism is there, Islam is there, Christianity is there, and so many other religions are there. I'm not familiar with all those religions. I don't know much of what they really speak of God, but definitely I know Christianity. I can know, reading the material that I have, the one of the scholars says the only religion that fits into the philosophical mind of reasoning for all the criteria that they have come up, the characteristics that they have come up with. If you were to prove a creator, these are the characteristics that they must find in that creator. It is said that only Christianity can fulfill. The God and creator of the Bible claims he's supernatural, he's powerful, he's eternal, he's omnipresent, he's timeless, he changes not, he's immaterial, he's personal, he's necessary, he's infinite. There's only one God. He was diverse yet with unity. He's intelligent, he's purposeful, he's moral, he's caring. All the qualities that the philosophy, the world is looking in a God, if they were to believe that existed, that created everything. You have all the answers in the Bible. But let's not believe them for now, because when we come to evidence for God, we can look at them in detail. But Bible have an answer to all the questions the philosophy or the thinking world is asking. Now look at this.
COVID, it doesn't matter.
Look at this. This person, he's a British man, one of the well-known atheists.
Yeah.
I believe for him, writing book is like writing an essay. That's the kind of scholar he is. And you must, if you see on the left side, there's a book called he wrote. There's a book called There Is No God, but he wrote a book called There Is a God. His name is Anthony Flew. This book is actually available on a PDF online. So if you just type that title, Google it, you can actually download that book. So this man, this is what he said. My discovery, look, this is a powerful statement. For 50 years, he taught there is no God. And the beauty is he didn't find God through Bible or religion. That is the important thing. How did he find? Look at his confession, page 33 in the book. My discovery of the divine has been a pilgrimage of reason and not faith. It was the more I reasoned for the existence of the universe, the more I realized there is somebody behind this, something behind this. It just can't be. That's the conclusion. It speaks very well of Professor Flew's honesty. After all these years of opposing the idea of a creator, he reverses his position on the basis of the evidence, not the Bible. He didn't try to say God is there by reading Bible. He said only by reason I can believe something exists beyond what I or you know. Let me make a bit of his statement a bit more clearer. This is what he says in that book. I now believe that the universe was brought into existence by an infinite intelligence. I believe that this universe intricate laws manifest what scientists have called the mind of God. I believe that life and reproduction originate in a divine source. Why do I believe this? Given that I expounded and defended atheism for more than half century, the short answer is this. This is the world. This is the world picture as I see it that has emerged from modern science. Science spotlights three dimensions of nature that point to God. The first is the fact that nature obeys laws. This is how he came to know, only by reason. He says nature actually obeys laws. The second is the dimension of life, if intelligently organized and purpose driven beings, which arose from matter. The third is the very existence of nature. But it is not science alone that has guided me. I have also been helped by a renewed study of the classical philosophy arguments. I must stress that my discovery of the divine has proceeded on a purely natural level without any reference to supernatural phenomena. It has been an exercise in what is traditionally called natural theology. In short, my discovery of the divine has been a pilgrimage of reason and not of faith. After teaching for 50 years, you must Google this man, Anthony Flew, a British atheist, a scholar. He confesses, he believes there is some, he doesn't believe it may be God or what, but at least he believes there is a divine presence. And I don't know if he really accepted Christ or not. I didn't read his biography, but how did he come to this conclusion? By reason and not by faith. So what am I trying to say? What is the title of our lesson for today? Can God be proven by reason? Or is belief in God irrational? Atheists, scholars, even this man, he come to understand the existence of God not by just Bible. It is by reason he realized it makes more sense to believe in a God. Even Hawkins, and when I tell you about the evidence next week, when we go look at some evidence, I will mention some of the statements from the Richard. Is it Richard Dawkins who wrote this book, God Delusion? I will make some statements right from within that book where he doubts his own theories and whatever, because reasoning doesn't make sense in what he wrote there itself. So is the existence of what was the title? Is belief in God irrational? Not my confession. Confession of those people who believe there is no God. They come to conclusion, no, there is possibility that God exists. If you don't believe, then you have to believe so many things that doesn't make sense to rational being. In fact, somebody said, you need more faith to be an atheist than to be a Christian, because you have to believe so much that doesn't make sense. That's so atheists need more faith than Christians because they have to believe so many things. For example, these statements that I mentioned, nothing produces everything. Non-life produces life. Randomness produces fine-tuning. Chaos produces information. Unconsciousness produces consciousness. Non-reason produces reason. All atheists have to believe these statements if they believe there's nobody behind what is existing today. So if atheists need more faith to believe that there is no God than those who believe in God. Okay, so that's where, so our conclusion is belief in God irrational? No, from the evidence that those who don't believe in God claim has come up with. Next week, we will look at 4 arguments. This is also not based on biblical evidence. We will look at the philosophical evidence and worldview. There are 4, there's so many other arguments, but 4 most important that the philosophical world look at to in order to prove or disprove that there is a God: ontological, teleological, cosmological, and moral argument. And then next week, when we think of this, we will also look at few arguments put forth by Darwin and Dawkins and other people who are more agents of saying that there is no God.